Congratulations, everybody. 7 hours, 9 briefers, 106 PowerPoint slides. You have completed the first day. For our last event, we'd like to borrow a page from Participatory Exploration and start to move a little bit from information dissemination and start the conversation. So with that, could we have the team leads come up to the stage and Lori come up and facilitate a dialogue.
Thanks. I'm going to give the team leads a couple minutes to work their way on up, because now comes to the part where we promised that we were going to get your input. What I would like to do, there are the questions, they didn't go away. What I'd like to do is give you 5 minutes to talk amongst yourselves. If you're, okay, who's our Myers-Briggs E's out there? If you haven't figured it out, I'm a big one, big E. So if you're the I, you like to do it yourself. If you're the introvert. If you're the extrovert, you like to talk to your neighbor about it. So take 5 minutes, talk through some of these things of interest to you, write them down on a little card for us, which we will take from you. You don't have to say it out loud if you don't want to, but we'd love to hear your input. And then we're going to run around for a couple minutes and just hit on each one of these questions real quick and get some responses from you just to stimulate that dialogue. So take 5 minutes, and I've got a timer up here and everything. 5 minutes, talk amongst yourselves. It's going to be 3 minutes if I don't start hearing talking. Wow, is there enough water up there? I'm going to get myself organized. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So now comes the fun part. Derek, do you have a microphone? Who else has a microphone? All right, awesome. So we want to hear from you. I know you think it's goofy, but we're tired of talking. We'd like to listen a little bit. So who wants to, let's start with a good one. Who wants to comment on something interesting or exciting they heard today? Come on, okay.
Thank you, Lori. The last talk was by Kathy Nadeau on participatory exploration. Very exciting, although I thought you caveated a bit by saying maybe the early missions wouldn't have much on there due to budget constraints. And I just wonder how much this will be lost due to budget pressure versus how much this new initiative will actually be a factor when all the missions are planned in the different areas.
So we're not going to do these as questions now. We're going to take them as inputs. Who else heard something interesting or exciting today? Somebody on that side of the room.
So it seems to me in the discussion of the commercial crew, there was an elephant in the room that didn't get discussed, or in a way it did get discussed. It was the implication on a couple of the slides that we're getting out of the ground ops, mission ops business. The agency isn't going to be doing that anymore, at least in the context of that particular commercial crew thing. The observation I've got is that if we're getting out of it in the short term for commercial crew, it seems like we're getting out of it for good, because you're not going to pull those people together again. If we need them again, we're going to have to go to the commercial side for that. It seemed to be the hidden, an elephant in the room in that presentation that wasn't said explicitly.
Okay, glad that was exciting to you. That's excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the input. All right, let's take one back here, then we'll move on to the next question.
I was excited to see the focus on some of the mid-level TRL development. As someone involved in the development programs and in the actual production programs, you want to pull the best and brightest ideas off the shelf, but too often the TRL isn't there. So I'm really impressed to see, and I hope the focus goes forward to actually demonstrate these technologies so they can be used in production programs down the line.
Thanks so much. Okay, something missing. We already heard maybe the ground ops piece.
Hey, Kevin Brown, Booz Allen. I'm going to back up to number one since we didn't cover that one too well. A couple of things that I think were exciting. One is we've got a focus on operability and affordability finally into the heavy lift, into the space lift arena, which I think is something we've been talking about for a long time and is very important. Another thing I think is exciting is it appears that we've got a reasonable framework emerging for managing this whole commercial crew idea. Still a lot of holes, a lot of issues. There were a lot of hands raised at the end of that session that didn't get answered. So I'm hoping we get a chance to go back and have those people answer those questions. Since I have the mic, one thing skipping ahead real quick. An area that they're looking into to make efforts more affordable, one of the things that NASA has always struggled with is cross-center cooperation. And I think that the idea of having deputies set up at second centers is a great step in that direction. But if we're going to make these efforts even more affordable, I think we're going to have to put more attention on integrating across you guys. And not even within the ESMD, but between the ESMD programs and the SOMD programs and other programs as well. Because there's a lot of potential for overlap, a lot of potential for duplication if we don't carefully look at those things.
Great input, thanks. Something else somebody saw that was
Right here.
missing?
Lori?
Who's, someone, good. Oh. Sorry. Okay, sorry, we had somebody over here and then I'll come to you, okay? Nope?
I'm a little late here. I was still on the exciting bullet. Can I-
All right, exciting's good. I prefer to spend my time on exciting. I don't know about you guys, but.
Lots of exciting things, but especially X-Scout seems pretty exciting because it's doable and willing to take a little bit of risk. I would only say it'd be more exciting if there was more than once every 2 years. Maybe every year would be a lot better, but I'm sure you feel the same way.
Sure, absolutely. Here you go.
A timeline that'll show when you're going to be able to pick up the people that are getting ready to get downsized significantly.
So some discussion of the personnel, the transition issues for personnel. Yeah, we'll get into some of that in the questions, absolutely. I think that's a fair point. One more thing that was missing.
Dontblick from Raytheon. I liked Doug's chart where it had the curve showing the technologies for a while, but then the more I thought about it, it seems to suggest that those are sequential buy downs as opposed to parallel buy downs.
They're not. Yeah, we got to work on that chart. We all love that chart, but sometimes, yeah, they're not meant to be that. Okay, let's move on. An out-of-the-box idea, no pressure, but, oh, look, a lot of hands. We got good ones. Oh, here's one.
A cross-cutting software program.
A what? Say it again.
A cross-cutting software program.
A cross-cutting software program. Go for it.
For access from low lunar orbit to lunar surface, it's perfect for the rotating skyhook. You can build it like Kevlar, not unobtainium, and it doesn't weigh all that bad. It's one of these accesses to get you from low lunar orbit down and back without belch fire systems.
All right, right on. Hey.
Carolyn Conley, MEI Technologies. Derating the 3 orbiters to not be man-rated anymore and flying them autonomously as an interim heavy lift launch vehicle. The software is available internally, and we've come a long ways now. I know Dryden has manned-steered vehicles. They regularly fly over fires. We do that in the Middle East regularly.
Great.
Red Whitaker, Carnegie Mellon. If you really want to motivate the precision landing, use some of the new prize authority for landing safely, say within 1,000 meters. Give 4 million. If you hit within 500 meters, maybe 6 million. Within 100 million, maybe, or within 100 meters, maybe 8 million. And if you hit the bullseye, 10 million bucks.
Interplanetary darts. I like it.
You got the money.
I do, don't I? Not yet, actually. We'll see. Yeah, that's great. All right. I like these out of the box. But, okay, one more.
Sherry Klug, US Array. Back to Kathy's presentation about participatory exploration. With all the industry people here, I know on the NASA side we're used to outreach and public participation and things that we're trying to grow out of this new concept. I'd like the industry people to think about adding that component into your proposals as you go to bid for these types of things across all of these different programs, and maybe NASA considering that as an extra added bonus to be able to expand those areas to have the public participate.
Cool. Okay, affordability, our final question here. Obviously that has been one of the threads and the themes of these new programs as we go forward. You've heard folks say this is point of departure, gosh, this is probably going to change, and obviously we've got the return vehicle out there as a potential lien on some of these budgets, so we're going to need to be able to do these things as affordably as we can. If people have thoughts about things we could be doing now to help us do that, love to hear them for a couple seconds now, or write them down, and we'll take them in. So who has an idea they want to share? Will.
Actually, I think this addresses 2 more than it does 4, but it's obviously premature in these discussions, but international partnership, of course, comes to mind about ways that is missing from the existing presentations. We could rope that in more to lots of these programs. It might address getting affordable as well.
You'll hear more about that in a second. Anybody over on this side? Affordable, affordable. You guys are all expensive over here? Okay.
Can we finally, please, quit making changes to requirements?
I'll get back to you on that around CDR time, if you don't mind. Okay. Guys, thank you. I hope that was kind of fun, and I'm going to leave my mic down here and go up and start taking your questions. So I have a giant pile of these cards with your questions on them and some with your comments. If you wrote down your answers to these questions, please pass them probably that way to the edges of the aisles, and we'll have the guys go along and collect them. For your questions, we're not going to get to all of them. I apologize for that. But we do have the panel up here, and we also have your one-on-ones tomorrow where things can be brought up like this. And we will commit to you to take the questions, probably not every single one to the word because there's some duplication, but we'll come up with a frequently asked questions page from this meeting, and we'll post those on the website somewhere, and we'll try and get that done within a week to 10 days, okay? But in the meantime, we're gonna get into some questions. So the first one, we got a lot of questions about international participation and whether we could say more about our thoughts there. And so I have actually asked Kathy Lorini, who is right here, who works with us. She's based at JSC, but works with us in ESMD as our sort of technical liaison with the international partners, and to say a little bit about our strategy going forward. And this has been something we've been talking about a lot these days. So Kathy, why don't you take a minute and talk about that?
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, as many of you know, I've been leading an effort to support the teams going forward in trying to define our overall partnership engagement strategy, as well as what are the things that we can do with each of the teams to help advance that strategy. So just to summarize, our vision is one of an international space exploration endeavor where we're going to multiple destinations beyond low Earth orbit together with our partners, and we're doing it to deliver benefits across a number of theme areas like increasing scientific knowledge, reducing risks for the next destination, enabling commercial economic expansion, these kinds of things. And these ideas, this vision is defined already in something called the Global Exploration Strategy, and Doug referred to it in his document, but it's a document that was developed a couple of years ago by 14 space agencies, including NASA, that represents a high-level vision for going beyond low Earth orbit together internationally. So what we've been doing is working on the specific steps to take that vision to the next level, because it really is a high-level sort of value statement kind of a vision. So what we've been working on is a strategy to further define that vision, take what's captured in the Global Exploration Strategy and expand it into something we call the Global Exploration Roadmap. And this roadmap will be the next level definition, putting some specificity together with our partners on where you'd go, when, why. And this sort of common long-term vision that we seek will help us to enable partnerships in the near-term programs that you saw today. So robotic precursors and the technology development and demonstration all present opportunities for international partnerships to serve to leverage our investments, ensure we're all working together to achieve this common long-term vision. And so the response that we've had from the international community in this coordination group that Doug also mentioned, called the ISEG, the International Space Exploration Coordination Group, has been quite positive and gives us the belief that we can achieve this long-term vision. And there is an interest around the globe in working together to implement this long-term vision. So the nature of the partnerships in each of the areas will be different. You know, robotic precursor partnerships provide us the opportunity to leverage our investments to get the precursor information we need from each of the individual destinations. You know, there's a lot of agencies looking at sending missions to the moon or talking about missions to asteroids. Well, what we seek is a coordinated investment plan where together we're getting the information that we need in order to provide the information to prepare for the human mission. So if we send a mission that duplicates 100% of what a Japanese mission to a NEO looks like in the same year, then we've probably not been successful in implementing a coordinated strategy. But if we work with them to define and agree on the information we should collect to enable human missions, and we divide and conquer, then it's an example of how we can leverage our investments. So we envision partner instruments on our spacecraft, our instruments on partner spacecraft, coordinated mission objectives, that kind of thing in the robotic precursor phase. In the technology demonstration, development and demonstration area, it's a little bit different. Somebody asked the question earlier, an ITAR-related question. I mean, we're not interested in co-developing technologies with international partners. I mean, there's a lot of economic and strategic interest in the investments that an individual agency makes. And we're not trying to decide to dictate who can invest in what, but we do recognize that there's not enough money in any one agency to invest in everything that we need to do these missions. So by talking about our areas of interest and what we're investing in a technology development sense and what we're planning for a technology demonstration program, that opportunities for partnership will evolve. Things like, you know, I've got a facility that may benefit you in testing a capability that you have, or you have a strong commitment to this particular technology, which enables me to say, oh, maybe I won't invest in that. And that's those are the examples of the kind of leveraging discussions that we want to stimulate. So we look for partnerships going forward where we can put partners in critical roles, and the partners that we'll put on critical roles will be the ones that we know, we trust, we know they've got a demonstrated capability and a long-term commitment to those capabilities, and it's probably partners that you're familiar with. We also look for roles for emerging partners. I mean, there's important roles going forward that emerging partners can play, and so we're trying to create a dialogue where interested agencies, new agencies, emerging partners are interested in joining the dialogue. They can see where the group is headed, where we're headed, and begin to start identifying roles for themselves. So again, near-term partnerships that are really working towards implementing a common long-term vision.
Thanks, Kathy. Excellent. So let's dive into some of these questions here. I've got little cards scattered all over the table. I think the first one will be for Doug. If you were a tree, what kind of tree? A money tree, maybe? No. Okay, I'm kidding. So there's some questions that have to do with what the HEFT is doing, the Human Exploration Framework Team. And so here's an example of one. An essential starting point for the analysis of heavy lift vehicle is a mission model. What is the set of payloads requiring heavy lift? Will you compare the heavy lift system against existing launch vehicles with using in-orbit assembly? That is, will you look at some different scenarios for the framework for the missions going forward? And I really do think that's part of HEFT's bailiwick. Why don't you say a little bit more about HEFT and what it's up to and what its deliverables timescale is?
Okay, is this on?
Yeah.
All right, the little light's on.
I think.
The HEFT is going to be looking at what the requirements are A part of this effort is to identify what we actually achieve on the missions. That backs you up into what capabilities you need to achieve those. What kind of crews do you need to take to a NEO or Mars? That defines concepts. So HEFT will look at concepts for what it takes to do these jobs. That backs then into what it takes to get them off the planet. And the chart I showed earlier that showed all the technologies that it takes to get to Mars missions with a single crew, that drives you to a set of masses of components, whether it's a Mars lander, whether it's a Mars transit habitat, whether it's a in-space propulsion stage. All these have masses that you have to lift, and you have to also consider the volume that it takes to package them. So in going through the exercises that the HEFT will do with the various sub-teams, they will be developing these concepts, understanding what scale it has to be at, and that will drive the approach on heavy lift. They'll also look at what it takes to assemble components in space for these larger missions. And so therefore, it's not just the lift, it's also what you do in space and how you assemble things. So they are looking at the various destinations, putting together, I mentioned earlier, design reference missions. Those are related directly to the concepts involved in doing the actual missions. They do the trajectories, they do every aspect of the mission end to end, and to understand the overall requirements.
Great, thanks. All right, we'll maybe do some more general and some more specific and kind of bop back and forth. There's a few here around the technology development programs, both ETDD and Flagship. So get ready, guys, you're on the hot seat. There were a couple questions about the 50% competed metric that you talked about for ETDD. I assume you talked about it since it's on the cards. It basically says, well, what about the other 50%? So can you talk a little bit about there's a lot of questions here around acquisition strategy. Not surprising you guys are interested. Obviously these things are not totally finalized yet, but we can start to tell you sort of what we're thinking.
Okay, the 50% is a goal. We actually probably won't achieve that until fiscal year 2013. We're starting around 20% in FY11. But the idea is to use competition to ensure that NASA has available the best ideas, no matter where they come from, whether it's from industry, universities, or the NASA centers. And most of the competition will be in the broad agency announcement. We've planned that in at the program level, and again, this supports long-range technology development in our foundational domains. But we're also planning to compete the external team members in our demonstration projects. So 50% of the funding will be competed. The other 50% will be used to maintain core capabilities at the NASA centers. If you compete everything all the time, projects come and go, people retire, we lose the base of knowledge within NASA. We need to maintain that for the future, so we're trying to ensure that there are key competencies and a base of foundational knowledge in the critical areas at the NASA centers. So that's what the other 50% is for.
And it's probably important to mention the Office of the Chief Technologist, technology investment programs as well. There's significant investment to be made there, nearly all of which is intended to be competed. So I think there's going to be a big pot of money open to industry and academia to compete for technologies at all different readiness levels across the scale, as well as participation in your flight demos, right? There's a question here which is really sort of aimed at both of you in terms of how much of the technology that we were investing in within Constellation will we be leveraging for both the flagship tech demos as well as the ETDD? Can you say something about the continuity of various capabilities as we go forward there, and how you've interacted with what's currently in work through Constellation.
Okay, in the Exploration Technology Development Program, which is now supporting Constellation, we've developed a lot of the technologies that will feed into our initial set of demonstration projects. So we picked that initial set of projects to build upon the technologies that we've already invested in. We've spent the last 5 years maturing some of these things. We're trying to bring those to completion in the next few years so that we can have some near-term wins. So a lot of the work in autonomous precision landing, in robotics, in nuclear fission, power systems technology will carry directly forward from the existing Exploration Technology Development Program into the new Enabling Technology Program that starts next year.
And what about for the flagships, Mike?
Well, generally it was the, I think the AR&D work, the sensors, technology. Let's go through. I don't think LOX methane was in the, as far as storageable was being worked, so that had nothing, there was no technology that was brought to bear. Let's see, the SEP was on the same scale as far as the ion thrusters. That was a unique, we did not bring anything forward. And the AR&D activity, I think, with respect to some of the work that the, for the entry, descent, and landing, those early formulation kind of things we did bring forward, so, and look at. So I think
So
that's
some,
where
but yeah.
Yes,
And
some.
Doug wanted to add something.
Yeah. We didn't really talk too much, I don't believe, about our transition team
That's what I was
today.
gonna ask next.
We are talking about the new program areas. We do have an activity, fairly significant activity in transition and working between Constellation and its cancellation. They are working to identify other technology areas where they're leading in advanced concepts, advanced technologies that can potentially transfer forward. Once again, the program content that we've shown today is point of departure, so I'm not sure we've incorporated all the possibilities there yet, but we will.
And so there are some more general questions about how it is we're going to make sure we capture the most essential elements as we move forward. And maybe somebody wants to say something about the Human Spaceflight Capabilities Forum we just held last week. We are going through a very systematic process with the centers to understand what capabilities, facilities, et cetera, that they have concerns about as we move forward, and then matching those against the requirements of these new programs. That process is in its infancy. There is funding in the FY2011 budget to give us a little bit of a cushion, and during that transition time, the Constellation transition funding to help us do that process smartly and expeditiously, but not so quickly that we let things slip through the cracks. So we actually had a forum last week, and some of you were there. I actually wasn't. Does anybody want to say anything about it? Excellent. Covered it all. So we are working through those on a case-by-case basis, and we'll continue to do so. And as you can imagine, it's a big process. And we also, of course, have a new Mission Support Directorate at NASA headquarters led by Woodrow Whitlow, who will be getting heavily involved in these discussions as well. So the key, I think, to making that work is, the more quickly we can get smart definition of these new programs, that the centers can stand up and be thinking innovatively about how they can use their capabilities moving forward, and then the more quickly that we can get through the congressional process to make sure that the new programs are moving forward, that will help in resolving issues associated with contractors, which was your question, ma'am, and others moving forward, and other capabilities. So that is the plan there, and we're working through that as we go. Let's talk heavy lift for a moment. Chris, is there a NASA expectation that industry will invest in order to participate in heavy lift vehicle technology development? Is there a requirement for that?
Well, currently there's not a requirement like we have in COTS, but that's not to say that our acquisition strategy may not have some non-traditional acquisitions. We will probably have the traditional contracting mechanisms that we have currently today, but again, that's something that we're going to flesh out in the next couple months as we continue to formulate the program.
And here's another one for you. Are we trying to catch up with the Russians in LOX kerosene propulsion?
Catch up with the Russians? No, I do want to make it clear that the program content for the large hydrocarbon engine is not to replace a Russian engine. That the thought is that an RP system is more operable and cheaper to develop. So that's really the thrust. It's not necessarily to compete or to catch up with the Russians.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who's next? Let's talk a little bit, building on the flagship tech demos and XPrim. So someone's asking, Jay, that you stated a close second goal is tech demos. If that's the case, what's the distinction between XPrep and FTD? How will they be coordinated? Obvious example is EDL at Mars. Do you two want to say something more about that? You're sitting right next to each other, coordinating right now, I'm sure. Collaboration, isn't it wonderful? That's right, you take it. No, you answer.
And with respect to EDL, was that the question?
Well, or any examples. I mean, I think that the question's about what, if XPrim missions will carry tech demos, what's the difference between the two programs?
Well, we're in the early stages of talking about it, but for example, EDL, because some of their missions will be trying to land something on the surface of Mars, we'll be maybe demonstrating our technology on that basis. And so we do have to integrate the functions and the capabilities together. So we shouldn't rule out the fact that if we've got a mission set in 2016 or 2018, that we would try to capture and collaborate and make sure that we're again getting the best bang for our bucks and doing it all at once.
Yeah, I agree. It's a matter of I believe what the primary focus is versus what the secondary focus is. Clearly, for the robotic precursor missions, the primary focus is precursor activities, with a secondary opportunity for technology demonstrations. Similarly, FTD has a primary focus of identifying technology demonstrations, and something that we hadn't talked about is what kind of precursor investigations are possible if you're doing an SCP to somewhere anyway. What kind of XPrim instruments could possibly go onto those missions? So there's a lot of collaboration that has yet to take place, and we have initiated coordination, but obviously we've got a lot of conversations to have.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Actually, when you one of the things that you want to understand when you go to some of these destinations, you're wanting to understand the conditions there, the hazards, some of the characteristics that will affect designs. But when you're going there, it's important in a number of cases, in entry, descent, and landing is one of them, is that's where you want to test those technologies in that relevant environment, in the actual environment that you're going to fly people. For instance, one of the ones that we've talked about for a number of years is aero capture at Mars. Its atmosphere varies wildly with solar activity, and so actually doing aero capture and using the atmosphere to slow you down is something that you really want to probably test out. Maybe that's a part of a robotic mission. But there are a number of cases like that where the exact environment is really where you want to test some of the technologies.
And you can imagine that we will have collaborative efforts between the programs in support of these different objectives. When there's a technology demo, an ISRU demo to be carried on an XPrim mission that happens to be going to the Moon or Mars, Chris will develop a payload and deliver it to the XPrim mission. So there will need to be a lot of collaboration and integration going forward, and that is something we're talking about a lot in the organization as to how we will do that most effectively, because it is it's a different sort of challenge for ESMD than, frankly, we've had in Constellation. So it's very exciting because there's a lot of opportunities here to leverage synergistic opportunities as we go forward. And so we are absolutely having a lot of discussions about that. So you will likely see missions at Mars that are a mix of technologies and measurements. So it's very cool. Let's see, what next? Let's keep talking robotics and technology a little bit. Someone's asking about an increased focus on ISRU, and are we focused on it enough in our program going forward? Can you guys say something about, more about what we will be doing in ISRU? And not, it says not only be volatiles, but includes metals and building blocks and institute fabrication and things like that. Are we considering the broadest possible definition of ISRU in our funding model as we go forward? Chris?
Yes, we are. We have an ISRU foundational domain, which is looking at some of these core capabilities to not only prospect for lunar volatiles, but also to produce oxygen from the soil of the moon or Mars, looking at NEOs and seeing if there are any metals or ices that we could exploit there, and designing precursor experiments that could fly to Mars on robotic missions to demonstrate the production of propellants from the Mars atmosphere. So we have a whole broad range of things we'd like to do. The lunar volatiles experiment is just the first one of many planned demonstrations in the ISRU area. It's the one that is the most ready at the present time to move into the demonstration phase, but we'll certainly follow that in future years with a whole lot of demonstrations of ISRU technology.
And including Earth-based demonstrations, correct? I mean, including lab and field-based,
Right.
where you might be able to get at some of the broader type ISRU.
So we are demonstrating these technologies in the lab and the field first, and then we'd hand them off to the robotics precursor mission to actually fly them in the real environment.
Thanks. Here's getting back to the question about commercial robotic missions, especially to the moon. We had several about that and about NASA's position about it. Here's quite a specific one. It says up to 100 kilograms of cargo delivery is available on some Google Lunar XPrize flights. A NASA statement that it might buy capacity on these commercial missions of opportunity would be helpful for business development. Will NASA publish its interest in such purchases? I'm going to give that one to Doug.
We are looking at those possibilities, and Google Lunar XPrize in particular, in terms of how we ideas on how we might participate. Certainly, in the robotic content that we talk about, we're talking about some specific missions, but we also talk about missions of opportunity. Those are at this point at the level of maturity in that discussion. We are talking generically about what kind of levels of spending we could put into that. Certainly, an opportunity where we could land instruments on the moon through a program like that is something we certainly will want to look at and take advantage of down the road, where things match up in terms of what we want to fly and what they can carry. So that's certainly a very unique opportunity in the future that we could fly some of those missions. We may want to talk about flying some of the technologies as well and demonstrate them. So I think we probably didn't talk about it a lot in our specifics that we went through presentations on, but we are looking for all kind of ideas and opportunities to take advantage of, and that's really kind of as I stated earlier this morning, that's one of the objectives of today, is to try to understand where these opportunities are and the ideas that go with them.
Very good, thanks. Okay, Phil, I've been sparing you till now. Time for some commercial crew questions. A keystone to this approach is having a broad base of customers buying rides. What price per ride does NASA consider the ballpark for attracting these customers? Let's start with an easy one. $20, $30, anyone?
In terms of
do we have a price point laid out?
Yeah, in terms of the services phase, we do not have a price point. We have not defined that and haven't even really talked about it, actually. We'd like to get it down as low as possible. We'd like to, for a number of reasons, not only for our own self-interest, but also because we believe that will engender other customers, and then the commercial providers can amortize their recurring and fixed non-recurring costs off on those other customers. So we would like it to be as cheap as possible. Beyond that, we have not set a number, and I don't believe we will set a number. On COTS Cargo, we didn't set a number. We let the proposers come back, and we picked the best solution for the most, for the best price, and I believe we'll probably do something similar with crew.
So here's another one for you. For the services, does this include spacesuits by the commercial suppliers for NASA astronauts, or will NASA supply the spacesuits?
Yeah, we don't envision supplying spacesuits. That would be up to the commercial providers. Again, that would unlevel the playing field fairly significantly, we feel, if we baseline suits in the development. All that is up to the commercial provider. How they provide the design that they come forward with to enable safe and reliable spaceflight is up to them. And if a lot of these concepts are already not mature, but they are already to some extent developed. So if we were to suddenly baseline suits and provide them as GFE for all providers, and another provider did not have suits in their business model, and they designed their spacecraft so as to get the reliability and safety factors that they needed without suits, if we provided them free to somebody who had them, that would significantly unlevel the playing field, and we felt like that is not appropriate. It was also not appropriate, we didn't think, for us to dictate suits being part of their solution. That is up to the commercial providers. If they want to use suits, they are perfectly encouraged to acquire that suit capability through commercial enterprise, coming to NASA, seeing what's available, maybe through a reimbursable basis. But suits, there's a lot of technologies that people would like us to baseline that we are going to not do that. It's really up to the provider to bring their particular design solution forward.
But we will be judging their fashionability and, whether they make
yes,
your butt
absolutely.
look big as part of the whole evaluation process. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, it's the end of the day. Anyone else ready for margarita? Let's go. Okay, so a couple more for you, Phil. Will NASA allow commercial vehicle suppliers to lease space or land at Kennedy or Cape Canaveral to build a launch pad and use it for commercial launches?
Was the first part, would we require it?
No, allow.
Would we allow? Oh, absolutely. Again, that would be up to the commercial provider. As a matter of fact, I believe SpaceX is leasing their LC-40 pad from the Air Force, I believe. Is that right, Max? Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So that would also be allowed as part of this program as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And finally, one more for you. Are we planning to continue, and maybe this is for Doug as well, to continue the CCDev technology development effort? The commercial crew transport seems focused on end-to-end crew systems, and no other technology program continues to work on human spaceflight technologies applicable to commercial crew.
Yeah, it's an excellent question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
I would say that's part of forward work. We have left the line for commercial demonstration and development fairly. We haven't gotten a precise acquisition or investment strategy associated with that. We have laid out the overall sort of components of the program, and that you saw in the waterfall chart that I presented. But beyond that, that would be a possibility. Let me just say that we haven't ground ruled it in or out, but it's definitely something to think about as we move forward. It's a definite possibility.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to gauge interest in such an activity. Prior to coming to headquarters, was leading an innovation technology study group for the agency, and one of our recommendations was about a NACA-like activity for commercial human spaceflight or commercial spaceflight, which would invest in sort of farther out technologies with commercial entities. And so it is not something that has been discussed very much right now, but I do believe it probably needs to come back into the equation as we move forward. So.
And it's a good point, because when you think about some of the other programs, the ETDD and the other ones, it doesn't really fit.
Right. There are a lot of places it could fit.
And where would somebody go? So they should be able to come here. We did. The 2015 date is kind of breathing down our back. So we felt like we really wanted to get forward on an end-to-end solution. We didn't feel like we had time necessarily to just do an independent technology development effort, but this is going to be ongoing beyond 2015. So we need to take a long-term look at that and see if a technology development wedge fits into that equation.
Very good, thank you. So there are a few questions here kind of to wrap up about forward plans, and specifically about funding and what is our intent moving forward to fund these new activities. Doug, I think, should speak a little bit about what we see as the sort of overarching constraints and the overarching plan. You saw it, I think, for each individual program, their best effort on what would be their timelines, but obviously we're working under some constraints. So Doug, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Right. We actually, in this year, are operating under constraints that are in law, and including the FY10 Appropriations Act, which says that we continue with the Constellation program, and that basically in that, that we not start new programs. So we are constrained in terms of the timing of a lot of what we talked about here today. So we've laid out, we've put these teams in place to begin to define what the programmatics are to starting up programs, what is the planning that we have to do, what form would they take. We've identified lead centers. We've done a fair amount of work in terms of what it takes to get to the budget plan for FY11. In doing that, we can only go so far. We can do the planning. We can, in certain cases, we can put out, well, in all cases, I believe we're putting out requests for information in order to broaden the scope of our understanding of what's possible within these funding lines and to influence that budget planning. In terms of releasing any kind of study contracts through broad area announcements and that sort of thing, we are limited there to programs where we have current content in this year's budget. So you do see broad area announcements talked about in the ETDD, which is a follow-on to our ETDP program, and is basically a continuation of a lot of that content. You also see it in the Human Research Program, where we have an ongoing program there. So we can continue to get information and actually move out in some of those. The area of heavy lift is another where we have in Constellation. We've had heavy lift content and do this year. So that's an area where we are putting out a broad area announcement. All the others, the new ones, we really can't get into any kind of contracted effort until FY11. So the constraints kind of force us into that. We, from the standpoint of trying to get these activities in place as quickly as possible, we want to do everything we can within our constraints to be ready to move quickly once we get resolution on the FY11 appropriation between Congress and the administration. Once there is resolution there and we are given the go-ahead, we want to move as quickly as possible. So we're doing the planning that we need now within those constraints.
Excellent. So again, you will be seeing some activities in the coming few months. You'll also won't be seeing, but we'll be getting ready for activities for FY11. And again, there's concern about being able to do those quickly that I see on some of the cards here, but we are committed to, as soon as we have authority to do so, moving out on acquisitions on a lot of these. And it's going to be required not just so that we can be responsible stewards of the taxpayers' money, but also, I mean, again, there are people involved in this, there are people affected, and the more quickly we can get going on the new programs, the more quickly some of that uncertainty will be resolved. So that is definitely our posture going in, is to be as aggressive as we can be within the perfectly reasonable constraints that we're under. And so, again, moving forward, you'll start to see a lot from us as the budget comes to resolution. We are almost out of time, and I am essentially at the end of my list of questions. So, Doug, did you want to make any closing comments for the day?
Actually, just in listening to the opening, some of the opening comments, I wanted to address a couple of those, some of the harder ones. There was mentioned concern over transition between the programs we have now and the new ones, and the effects on people and their jobs. There was the other point made on some of the skills, like in ground ops and mission ops, that are a part of that discussion. We obviously are very concerned ourselves about doing the best we can for our people. I really don't, personally don't care that much for discussions of workforce, because that's too impersonal. Everybody involved in our current programs across the agency are our people. They're our teammates, they're our friends and colleagues. So it's important to me that we take the transition, not only the transition that we've got in place in our team for transitioning off the Constellation program, but also backing up to the transition efforts that we have had in place for transitioning from the shuttle program to Constellation. So all of those efforts are extremely important to us. We haven't talked that much about them today because we're really talking more about new content. But it's important to understand the impacts and potential impacts on facilities, on people in their lives and jobs. And there's a lot of hardware involved in dispositioning too, but it is important to us. It's important that NASA maintain its important skills. We have skills that don't exist anywhere else that we need to understand how we carry forward. So those things are important to us. They're in talking about starting new programs. That is a significant part of wanting and the motivation toward wanting to get things started as quickly as possible in the new program areas. So I didn't want to leave those lying. Those were important comments that a lot of people are worrying about. So the best thing that we can do is continue to communicate what we're doing and steps we're taking to try to mitigate some of the issues associated with that. And that is also part of the reason that we put a website, both an internal website and an external website in place in order to communicate better. That's something that we'll continue to keep trying to work on to do that. So that's one area that I wanted to specifically address because that's important to all of us. Another one that's not quite as heavy, actually, is a point that was mentioned in one of the comments, I believe, on whether there'll be overlaps between programs, like between us and the other mission directorates and Office of Chief Technologist. We are putting together mechanisms within the agency to keep those kind of things from becoming problems, so that we spend our money wisely with that. I just wanted to make a comment on that. And overall, in closing, I appreciate all your participation in this. It is important. Probably the most important part of this meeting is what's going to happen tomorrow, in terms of the interactions with you all and our team members here, to get your ideas once again, to understand your concerns and help us figure out how to work our way through this transition and what we can do to come up with the best program going forward. So I appreciate ahead of time. Thank you for your participation and encourage you to talk with our folks and let us know about your ideas.
Thanks, Doug, and thank you all for being here for this action-packed and PowerPoint-packed day. I'll bring Mike up to formally close the day, but I hope through some of the information that we were able to give you today, you can start to see yourselves in this new program and see the value of the portfolio of investments that we're proposing to make in order to enable a sustainable path beyond low Earth orbit for humans. So thank you all for your attention. I'll bring Mike up to close. Thank you, panel.